All right. Good evening, friends. My name is Dago Driggs, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote panel and moderator for this evening. Over the years that I served as policy director of nofamass, through conversations with my longtime friend Hartman Deetz and hearing the words of elders like Casey Camp, I came to understand how our work at NOFA fits within a deeper effort to restore our relationship with nature, how we relate to each other and the more than human world. The rights of nature and Buen Vivir movements, as I've come to understand them, encompass virtually every aspect of
Sorry to interrupt,
the
Marty.
NOFA seeks to make in the world, and much more. I was so excited to be asked to help to assemble a keynote panel on this potent topic, and I'm so grateful to our esteemed panelists who have chosen to join us this evening. Now, I know that we're going to want as much time as possible to hear from them, so for the sake of time, I'll share one-line bios for each of them and let them share what they would like about their own stories. Casey Camp Horinek is chair of the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature and is an elder of the Southern Ponca tribe. Talia Landry is youth advisor to the Mashpee Wampanoag Native Environmental Ambassadors and is from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. Inari Chimba is an educator and Indigenous activist from the Panzaleo and Otavalo towns of Ecuador. And Hartman Deetz, our moderator, is an environmental advocate and consultant from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. And with that, I'll pass it to our moderator, Hartman, to begin this conversation.
Yes, I am working on reassigning you, Gabrielle.
How do we feel? Are we ready to try to move forward, or?
Okay, let's continue. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody out there in the virtual, out there in the interwebs to come and join us for tonight. The importance of organic farming is, it can't be understated. Up until very recently, when the fashion industry managed to overtake you all, farming was the number two contributor to carbon emissions, to shaping our environment. Fact matter is every continent except for Antarctica, but every continent where people live on a regular basis has farming, and this is spread out any place where you have human beings and where you have people that need to eat food. Farming comes hand in hand with that. So certainly the impact on the globe overall that farming has to be as big a footprint as mankind itself. So what we do in little ways and in big ways continues to have impact and ripples throughout the world, because this is an intricate system to our survival, just as the earth itself that you sink your hands into when you plant a seed, just as the air that the plants are able to suck in and breathe out so that we can breathe in and breathe out for them to take that carbon in, and that reciprocation and that water that those plants drink up from their roots. It's all interconnected, and we are interconnected with it. I'm excited to have really amazing guests that we get to hear from, and that we get to speak with tonight. We have Talia Landry, as said, who's a cousin of mine from the tribe I come from, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. The native environmental ambassadors are, I just heard recently, one of only 2 youth-led rights of nature initiatives that are happening in the world at this point. So that's a real, real inspiring story to hear the youth taking on that work. We have Nanari Chimba, who is, in Ecuador, in one of the hearts of the biodiversity that's left in the planet, that the Amazon and the Andes, that have so much to offer and are such a precursor, and showing us what is to come, what kind of world that we all are going to have to live in. If we don't take care of this Amazon, and we don't take care of the biodiversity, if we can't take the lessons that they've been able to hold on to there, we have solutions, we have answers, we have people we can learn from, if we're willing to turn and look outside the same places where we're always being told to find our answers from captains of industry or heads of government that seem to have continuously failed us. And we have Casey Camp, who's just been a pillar and a giant in the world of standing up for Indigenous rights and environmental rights, which are often the same thing, as we, in our worldview, don't often separate ourselves from this idea of nature, that it is something distinct or different from us and our bodies, that we are the same as it. So when we defend ourselves and we defend our relatives, we defend the beaver, we defend the otter, we defend the herring, we defend the eagle, because they are our relatives, we are them, and they are us. And Casey has lived a lifetime of standing up for all of our relatives, all of this life on Earth. So she brings all that experience to the table, and it's going to be great to hear from everybody. We're going to do a number of, I guess, 10-ish minutes. We're trying to get folks to keep to introductions from folks, and so we're going to let you speak to for your own selves, your own words about what right to nature means to you, and your time and what you want to share with us here tonight. First, we'll turn to Talia Landry.
Thank you, Hartman. Thank you, everyone, for having us here tonight and having this important discussion that is very close to all of our hearts here on the panel today. Again, I am Mashpee Wampanoag. I come from the land of the Wampanoag, the people of the first light. We have been in contact for the longest as the first settlers arrived on our shores. So it's been a long battle of not only existing as a people, but also preserving our homelands along with our culture. So the role that I play within our community, I have a communications background, but I also am a heavy youth worker. I'm in the education department within the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. And the grant that I manage right now is direct services with our tribal youth. And a lot of the focus is on cultural revitalization, but within self-identity, self-awareness, to help them be more successful within the education realm of the world that was not made for our Indigenous children. But that has led me to my rights of nature work, just my lifelong work, as well as what I'm working within right now. So the rights of nature concept is a concept that I think is ingrained within us as Indigenous people. So it's not a foreign concept. So it wasn't hard to grasp when it was presented to us in a legal manner. As far as the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, we were given a conference by the Organization of Pioneers that kind of introduced the concepts through a relative of ours from the Ho-Chunk Nation that developed some of their rights of nature passages. So they presented within our community, and the work kind of just settled down, but then the opportunity arose again where they had an opportunity for a youth fellowship. And I naturally came on just by accident, I guess, or on purpose, as the way that we see it. And it more fell into my lap as far as organizing the youth to go forward with this first campaign of rights of our herring, of establishing rights of nature to protect our herring, because our herring are one of our first signs of life within our new year. It brings a lot of our bigger fish. It's at the same time of our, like as I said, our new year, so it brings life. So we thought this was a great start within our passages of rights of nature to establish the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. So we can continue on to persevere within our culture and be able to have those resources that we need to be able to pass down our culture and be who we are as Indigenous people. So we developed a youth group called the Mashpee Native Environmental Ambassadors that were created to enact rights of nature law through the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. And their first campaign is the rights of herring. So in some of their first initiatives are not only to establish this law, which is the ordinance that protect the herring and establish the herring have rights, but to take that law and use it within our co-management practices and within our initiatives of the tribe, as well as take it to the state to gain those authorities back to control the habitat that those herring are in, and to just take on that legislative role or advocacy role to make sure that we're standing up for herring in any aspects, whether it comes to federal or state or town issues that will make sure that we can thrive and continue our culture preservation. So the youth actually had a very successful presentation with our tribal council and had the tribal council pass the first legislation, which declared the state of emergency for the herring, that obligated them to put their resources to help us establish the law, as well as any support that we do need in enacting those certain things and gain funding and resources through the Natural Resource Department of the tribe in order to reconstruct a lot of the herring runs that have made it very hard for our herring to be able to get to the places that they spawn. So it's drastically decreasing their population. And we do that through our work with our culture keepers. So the youth are getting one-on-one opportunities with our elders and our everyday fishermen and fisherwomen to be able to learn different aspects of our culture that not only include to the herring, but everything around that and life within itself. So not only is it rights of nature for us, but it's our rights to be who we are as Indigenous people and to keep our youth persevering in that way. Because as I mentioned before, we have been assimilated for the longest as far as within this Indian country. And what we face on the day-to-day within our youth is that culture preservation and them losing their self-identity and having to kind of keep up in this fast world of colonization and their Indigenous life and traditions. So this not only is our environmental way of keeping the environment safe so we can exercise our culture, but it's also helping our youth being able to get back to that in a way that it will help them go further on so they could teach their youth the next 7 generations. And I'm very happy to be here and honored to be speaking with our panelists that we have today. And I can't thank you guys enough for having us.
Thank you, Talia. I guess next we're going to turn to Nanari Chimba to share some of what she's been able to learn in her work, in the hands-on work she's done in the South. So Ecuador is it poses its own challenges. They're different from what we face here in this part of the world. So Nanari, please feel free to share now.
Sorry, we're just taking a moment to change interpreters. So next up will be Carolina.
Good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to share this space with all of you. Answer the question, I would like to say, like one of the interpreters, the terms, I don't want them to be interpreted in English, which is wawa, means wawa, means girls, kids. That will be in my intervention. How do I define the nature rights? I consider, how do I define that? It should be the reciprocal recognition with the Pachamama, with the Mother Earth, with all of us. Among our community, the IU. The IU means the family, extended family. Is just not about the human being, the cosmos, the whole planet. That's where it comes from. That's what it was, this concept. Here in Ecuador, we do know. So Ecuador is the first country that assigns this, and it's very, very fundamental. It's again result about the indigenous among the indigenous that we do this. We also recognize this juridical about the people have died, that implies that relationship, that be part of that definition with those concepts about the nature rights. So we should recognize that it comes from that cause, but over the time, so that it was changing. So it was changing the good living that I understand that translated from that original, like the hegemonic or the colonizing, is being translated from the who understands this language. So that how that is start breaking out that term about this cause, where it comes from. Also, this demand that we recognize the natural traits from our ancestor had another word for this, but at the same time it breaks out like in different terms, like it's a local right here in Ecuador. That means that it breaks that relationship, like that community with all of it. What implies to this with the Pachamama, the Mother Earth, that we assume that a good cause, the good living in a family, how we recognize this. So for us, part of this cosmovision that is cosmic system, we understand that relationship. We recognize that. From that recognition, we ask for that reparation. For us, it has been that fundamental. So thank you that was recognized in 2008 with this type of the recognizing that implies for collective rights for humanity, that it goes with this with the humans. So we can demand like the violence against the water, against the Amazon. So that is fundamental. And any other way, it's like living the battle. That dream about our ancestor, that one time they said on the hard time that when the invasion came here, like the eagle in the this is what we're looking for. We're looking for juridical, looking for the right. So we're looking for this type of terms now from that culture that has been destroyed, but it's very important to use those terms. So we had to put in the right place because we're living from there. So for us, so if we talk about the nature's right, implies how to live in Ishkayak and in these two worlds, in these two ways that how we habitat this new world, if we say it that way, from its own terms, we should not lose our roots. We should not lose the history that we have lived from the nature. So it's necessary to mention those because that right was taken away. So we do need terms for that. If we not gonna resolve this problem, we're not gonna from the nature that attributes the people just like us. So we have to utilize these terms that invites all of us to habitat this world occidentally. So from that terms, from the words academic, it has to be from that side. So we have to repair to this nature. The rights was taken away because our relationship with the Mother Earth was broken up.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that this is presented as something new, and yet it is ancient, and we've lost that connection. Um, it's so important to remember. Well, I guess we're going to turn to Casey now to speak some. I mean, I think it's such an important view that you're able to present to us, Casey, being in Oklahoma. And I mean, as a kid, I grew up with the musical Oklahoma, and the idea, Oklahoma with wind come rushing class planes, and and the idea that this is all farmland. This is farmland. This is where farms are. And I know through knowing you that that's not necessarily what a lot of people in Oklahoma see now. That's not necessarily what Oklahoma is anymore. So you've been able to see so much in your lifetime, and we're just really happy to have you share with us. So please.
Appreciate it, Hartman. It's always good to see you. And it's good to hear these young ladies and the wisdom that they already have. I want to apologize to everyone because I do live in the country, so it's a satellite connection. Are we good? Okay, all right. Then I want to also thank my guest of honor here for all of us, this sacred water that is life itself, and that gives us the ability to live and to come together at times like this, to grow those foods, to grow these bodies, to grow the spirit. Yeah. Thank you. Yishishiyudi with the K Banka Abli Mashte Banka, Oklahoma. Wahe Tamajik Dea Tinike Gankagida Deati. Judy is my true name, my Ponca name. Casey Camp Horinek, my husband's name, Horinek, is a colonized name. I live here in the occupied territory of Oklahoma among my Ponca people who were forcibly removed to this territory along with 36 other tribes of people, nations of people. At the time my grandpa was 6 years old, he was on that forced removal from Nebraska or Nebraska. I told you I was looking forward to this time, and I'm very grateful to be able to be here among you. Several of you, I recognize your names and want to give you personal greetings, and to say it's good to be with you in this new way that the web of life expresses itself on the World Wide Web instead of the ways that we would sit at a fireplace outside and talk and enjoy each other and share the food that we grew, hunted, fished, however it happened to be. And in this way, we're sharing the food of the spirit and the food of the words that we can enrich one another with. So it's a good moment for me. As my young relative Hartman said, I've been around a while. I'm very blessed that I just had my 75th birthday recently, and I feel like a true elder instead of a junior elder, moving right into that area of being a grown-up. I'm a great grandmother. I've been married to my companion for 54 years now, and I think we'll make it now. We're doing good. I've had the blessings of teachings from my folks, from the original ways of our people who lived that time before the forest removal and right after, when we were all living in balance prior to the time of the occupiers taking the hunting and the food and the natural seeds and corrupting them and digging into our mother, the earth, her bones, her bloodstream, her way of being, of teaching us, and lived through that time of my mother and father being kidnapped into boarding schools and having to come back home. And in the way of our people, they say, go back to the blanket to relearn the original teachings. Those teachings have come into that full circle of understanding within the human and within the understanding of how do we face this time where our children and their children and their children are going to be living in a world that is called climate change, climate crisis. And that's why we are reintroducing, that's why Indigenous wisdom now has the understanding to be able to speak your language and live the life of both societies, so that we can also reintroduce to ourselves and to you how living in balance makes sense at this particular time, how those old teachings in today's world have value, so that our great-grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and the relatives that my young relative Hartman talked about, those with 4 legs, those with wings, those that burrow into the Mother Earth, those that have roots that you all call plants, all those relatives that are interconnected with us. One time when I was down with in the Nari's area, and actually I've been in your area too, Talia, a long time ago, maybe 30, 40 years ago. I made a relationship there on that little, and I was taken into a women's circle. Chief Slyfox introduced me to relatives there. So this connection is old and new. Yeah. And Nanari, when I was down there, one of the sisters, we had a walk where all the Amazonian women came out, 7 nations came out, and the women were leading for the first time in their history, because this time of rebalance has to do with that as well. The reemergence of the balance of women and men. And it's the original ways. It's the way that we understand. And yet that's been suppressed and has created a situation that has gotten us all into trouble. But while I was down there, one of my relatives, through an interpreter, told me, coming from Standing Rock in the battle that we had there over the 50 million people downstream, we were standing up. My son said, we're in leadership positions there, and we called ourselves water protectors, land defenders. And it became clear to listening to my sisters down in that southern hemisphere that we're not defending nature, that we are nature defending itself. And from the teachings that I had in the past in ceremonial ways, they told us then, way back when I was young, that a purification was going to come, that the Mother Earth would purify herself. I think today's jargon, it's called climate change. That the Mother Earth, in order to be able to make a way for the generations to come, not just of us foolish humans who have dirtied our own nest, but for all living things that sustain life on earth, because earth herself, she will endure, just like the moon and the sun and the winds and the rains. But things have had to be rearranged. So now that this climate crisis is saying, hey, pay attention, just like a good mother would to her children, just like a good father would to his children. We're being called on now to share times like we are at this moment, with which I can learn from you, what I can learn from these young ladies, from our moderator, from all of you who are growing the food right now, and that you could learn something from us too. And I want to tell you that rights of nature in the Ponca territory, because we are a sovereign people. Each and every nation here is just like, if you want to look at what's going on with Russia and with Ukraine, with Israel and the Palestinians. We are a nation within these nations that has the ability to pass the statutes, to set the policies within our territory that protect the water, the air, all living beings. And in turn, that takes care of the farmers around us, the ranchers around us. The living beings have a way to go forward. Hartman, I forgot to look at my clock. So whenever it gets 10 minutes, be sure and do that. Because, you know, being an elder, if I was among my own folks, they'd never shut me up. So I'm just gonna try to be nice here and value your time as much as I value your being. I have heard something here tonight, though, that I want to understand clearly, because I come from a place where the oil and gas industry, these mass murderers, these killers of all living beings that have put us in these situations, these oligarchs who have found that their false sense of money to put into their pockets are going to make a difference in their lives. And so the heck with the rest of the world, right? That they are doing this carbon trading, this carbon sequestration. And they use those carbon credits to continue to poison my people and the deer and the fish and the waters and the cattle and the farmers around here. So you cannot grow organic food within an 8-mile radius of my tribal location right now. It's that messed up. And carbon credits and carbon sequestration give them permission to continue to pollute. And that's a real danger to me. So when I was hearing these things from you fine people who are doing your organic work, you must understand, to us, to me, that's a false solution, that you cannot buy and sell the air that we breathe and that all living things depend on without there being a consequence to it. You know, they have offered us those opportunities, and now they're piping. The air doesn't sit still. It's going to go inside the mother, and that is going to naturally recycle back into us again in some fashion. And it may not be today, but it will happen. It will go into the waters. it will go into the fish, it will go into the plants. And as they produce and reproduce their nations, those particular families of beings, be they plant, animal, earth, sky, whatever it is, it's a false solution to buy into, and money is not going to be the answer to this. Do you know that they're using carbon sequestration in whales now? That they're buying and selling the ability for the whale to be able to absorb carbon inside the ocean, which is a natural thing that happens. I know that my friends down in the Amazon ended up doing this carbon trading with the city of Paris. So they were told, well, you just count your trees and you continue to take care of them the way that you are, and we'll pay you X amount of money. And then Paris, the city itself, could continue to pollute all of the peoples and the rivers there. So sorry, off on another tangent, but it's important that we all understand everything has a price. And if the cost is of today's value of money that you put into a bank account, it's a false solution. The only solution that we can find is to value nature, because we are nature. It's not about human rights. It's about the rights of nature, that we all are going to have to come together. We've had the hottest year ever on Earth again. Consecutive months that are the hottest days ever. The Earth will endure. Do we fall in line and recognize that, again, we're not just protecting nature, we are nature as humans, protecting itself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Casey. Yeah, you know, the idea that the air doesn't sit still, I think, is probably something for us here in New England is probably quite relevant, especially after this last summer. We had wildfires in Nova Scotia and Canada that made the air thick with smoke down here. And we know that that air and that smoke crossed borders, not just as far as towns and counties and states, but whole nations. Um, these lines are drawn on a map by colonial powers and often have very little to do with natural borders or natural boundaries that are often have a bigger impact on weather and its patterns because this is the natural world. This is natural law. So we've seen that, and we've seen how these ideas that everybody can do as they want as long as they do it on their own yard or their own plot of land is not, there's no truth in it. What we do to ourselves, we do to our neighbors, and we are all interconnected. Talia, I know that you're also involved with the farm work at Mashpee Farm, the tribal farm. And I know that you've got some of the youth involved there as well. Can you speak as far as your views as to what are some of the roles that farmers overall can play in establishing rights of nature? What about land stewards and other folks that have that have a hands-on interest? How do we work together side by side to make some of these things move forward?
Yeah, that's a good point, Hartman. I think one thing that is very adamant to discuss is the fact that, you know, a lot of the time within the colonial law and their legislation, lawmakers are people that are just writing laws that aren't actually out, you know, whether pertaining to their life. So that's a key concept as far as within our rights of nature passages is acknowledging us as traditional ecological knowledge keepers to be able to guide certain solutions to problems that we're facing now. But farmers especially, because you see the impact of what it can do to soil, to the environment around, to what it does to your crop and your harvest each year. Recognizing those problems and even identifying some solutions and partnering with, you know, Indigenous communities around your areas to work together to do whether it's programming or any sort of consultation as far as if a problem arises and with discovering solutions. I think working with Indigenous communities is a key way to be able to help this rights of nature initiatives through a farmer's standpoint within the region, because you guys are who it's affecting as well. So we're coming from a standpoint that is, you know, cultural, and it's within our blood as far as what our ancestors have taught us and what we see from the elders and what we hear from the elders as far as the sort of state that the environment has gone into. But you guys are there to be able to advocate on the other side of things that may not have grown up in the environment that we have, to be able to have the oral traditions, but you can see scientifically the things that are happening, and as well as just being able to communicate the actual concept of rights of nature is a big key thing that our youth have been enduring as far as really campaigning to the masses, because as I said in my introduction, it is a concept that isn't foreign to us as Indigenous people. So when you say rights of nature and, you know, how a tree should have a right just like a human, that's something that clicks very easily. But from a culture that developed the society that we are fighting against right now, it's important for that understanding to persevere through these talks and through these conversations and through our work, because it's going to take us as an entire, you know, human race community to be able to solve this problem, that we have to take care of Mother Earth and be able to live here. And so I think that's one or a few key things that come to mind with that question.
Sorry. Well, thank you so much. You know, and I'm going to turn to Nunari here in a second. And I spent some time in Peru among the potato farmers in the Andes, and it's such a hands-on work with your hands in the soil, like, you know, right there on the earth, you know, in the earth. That lived experience speaks for so much. There was a program where we had farmers help us to count insect samples in a soil, and we counted on one side of the road that hadn't been farmed, and we counted the insect samples in a shovel full of dirt, 300 insects, 25 worms, however many casings. And then we crossed the road, maybe 5 meters, take a soil sample, 3 insects. And you don't need to have a 3-ring binder with the paper after that. The farmers already know that they can see the soil is dead. And it was just a very powerful thing, because the farmers know. The farmers have this knowledge. They know from working with the land, from putting their hands in the soil, Um, in that, I know one of the common practices that we would see with the agrochemical companies in Peru uh, is that they would prey on the linguistic inequalities. They would prey on the monolingual, non-Spanish speaking people, on the illiterate people to pump the agrochemical use of agrochemical fertilizers. A lot because they couldn't read the warnings, the safety warnings on the packaging that required them to be able to have on the packaging. And so they were told everything was safe, everything was okay, and this was a common practice. Do practices like this happen in Ecuador as well with the agrochemical companies? And can you speak some to how what agriculture is like in Ecuador, how it impacts the native communities? Minari?
Hello. Well, here, the agriculture, we see diversity from indigenous and non-indigenous that work the earth. It's very important, the justice, the linguistic justice. The original language is very important. And the concepts come from a cosmovision and a culture that comes from the territory. And then there is it's very different how we take care of the earth and the translation that has been put out there. So we have the chacarera, and the farmers. So this is a difference. There is different ways we work with the earth. The farmers, they don't have the originary roots. They don't have a lineage. Sometimes they do, but they don't have a relationship with the earth from the heart, from the spirit, because it's very important that we don't romanticize our fight. It's breaking our fight, romanticizing our work and the relationship that we had, because the terms are very important to recognize this diversity and to recognize ourselves, because I am an indigenous woman is very different than my grandmother's reality. She didn't know how to write or read. How her reality was different than my reality. My grandma was living with the earth, and the only economic things she had was from the earth, and I cannot put myself in that reality because it's unjust. So we have to think about many realities that have indigenous realities, and then that way we can actually see that that it can come from different types of realities. There is a lot of times people think that people who are working the earth is poor and is indigenous. It's not always that. And in Ecuador, the reality is people who work the land are the most poor people. Also, the farmers have had this story of rapture, of not being the daughters and sons of the earth. So it's not hurting anymore. it was very important. I'm not sure how to say it, but to come from a more humane part. Yes, we want to say, we want to question our rights. Only the humanists that have had this relationship with the Mother Earth the human had left the relationship with the earth, to speak with the earth, to have this talk with the earth. A lot of our agriculture people have broken this relationship. A lot of people will be working with the earth without the relationship itself. And a lot of times people from their own community work with the oil companies. The same people from our community sometimes come and work with the people who are not doing good to the earth. We don't want to romanticize because we have to repair. We have people inside our own community. We have to, it's not only the change in the weather, it's a crisis, it's a spiritual crisis that it has been breaking the relationship. I don't try to romanticize the relationship, but there is people, indigenous, that have also broken this relationship. So we really want our people to love their language, this brown skin, again, to recognize ourselves. If we recognize ourselves, that has this Jewish and Christian school that has broken a lot of things, we can recognize the earth, the Pachamama, Mother Earth. It will be a little bit easier. There is people who work the chakra, which is a different way of farming that has biodiversity and culture. That there is languages that there's no, it's a conversation. It's a sharing of ideas. It's a share. It's not just talking, it's a share. In general, the chacareros are the grandmas and grandpas that still speak the language and a lot of times don't read and write, but they have knowledge, they have wisdom. And there's also people who might be chacareros and chacareras that 7 days a week that I have to recognize myself sometimes. I don't have the knowledge or the wisdom. How us as young people, we live in these two worlds that we have to know how to live in these two worlds so we don't step on the spaces that we are looking for. In these two spaces of chakra and farming, there's a problem that the racist systems allow that there is violence, that both people, the chacareos and farmers live in precarious ways, because a lot of work for all these potatoes, they pay them $1. In statistics and people who have been in academics, there's people, they have been noticing that there won't be people working the earth anymore. And that signifies that there is a problem, that this is not a problem only of the people of Indigenous, Black or brown. It's a problem that is going to be for all of us, because the city without the farms, it's not going to be working anymore. Why the young people are leaving the farms? Right now, we are talking about going back to the roots and the colonization that continues to, the sexism, homophobia, all of these things that have broken nature. And at one point, we were able to live in this diversity, but when we broke the diversity, there is the first thing we have to do is really stop the colonial issues, things that we don't want to see. We don't want to eat our food. We don't want to see our skin that is like the earth. It's brown and we're like the earth. A lot of time, the relationship that we have,
We have to
How do
repair
we-
this
How do we
part.
figure out how to,
continue
how
to
to feel the hearts
repair.
of those farmers?
Not just
But what about people who are living in the city?
people,
People, white people, indigenous people.
these
What do they have to do
people, what's
What role do they
what
play?
kind of role they have
to be able to repair
What's the-
repair
that
this?
damage
what
that's been
people
done?
need to do to
Are we
repair
psychologically,
the-
economically,
or the
spiritually?
emotionally,
You know, that's happened
how
in the
can we
countryside.
repair
this-
the relationship
a
with
responsibility.
the farm?
So there is a relation.
So we as educators,
relation.
we're against completely, we think it's really important for there to be intercultural
This
education
is like a utopic dream that
To-
has been accomplished for
to be
our
carried out
ancestors.
by our elders.
Right
here in the city of
in the
Quito,
city of Quito. We
There's many
have
different
worked
species of seeds,
some
and there's,
seeds.
you know,
We have
black, white,
created
indigenous,
these
Campesino people,
skills for the,
all of those different realities
Indians.
exist.
indigenous people.
And so how from there do we
How do
realize
we
what it
know
is
that
most
it's really
important to
important to
heal, you know, of white
heal
people as well, and their, you know, and their children, in their childhoods, you know, that from what they're
that
carrying,
they
the
carry
racism,
with
the colonialism,
races that they carry
you
with
know, the weight that
that
they're carrying of,
they
you know,
carry
the
pain,
pain of
the
migration.
poverty. How can
And to
we
repair all of that, to
that
begin to
we
do the work we have to
see
do together in
that the
agriculture,
agricultural
so that
work
people who
in a way
who
different.
live in the
So
city can also like
people, they should
understand,
pay a fair amount
and the
for
people who live in the
farming,
countryside should
and
demand
they should
and recognize.
should be
We at
recognized
least
from there.
we
also
work a lot
work
together
with
on
this
this word.
that we feel it
We feel that in this
in this
context,
context that we are
the
living that
globalize,
globally, that also
you know,
goes
this is what,
to
you
the
know, people say
conclusion
that
like we study
to be
more,
an
like
academic,
we
to be talking
speak
about certain
another
things in a
language,
certain
we do
language.
recognize that we do not make
What do we do
this.
then
What should we
to
do
be coherent
to be aware
with the
technology
wisdom of
the
our people,
that they have
you know,
introduced the base to us,
given like
that
the
it
horizon,
is
the
fair and dignity.
what
a
is it,
good
the Buen
living
Vivir mean
and
of
human
our,
being in the
our
nature.
family human and not more than human,
How can we teach and learn
and to
to
learn to find a
be
tenderness
involved
for each
with that?
other.
How can we
So it's
appreciate
from that tenderness and from
because
that care
that's That's
that we're
what
going to
we
begin to fall in love again,
started to be in love
to see
again,
things from a different
to
perspective,
see things
to
differently,
to come out of
be-
childhood and to adulthood,
Now, the adult people, they
and to be able to
don't
say, like, talk through all these
surprise, they can
discourses, to talk about the
it.
earth,
Yeah,
you know,
the
her rights,
rights,
but here to
inside
not
of
feel
you, it
anything,
doesn't
and that's the
move
thing that's very
anything.
important to us.
But that is the part that is very important for us.
Thank you, Nari.
Muchas gracias, Nenari.
Yeah, and um, as far as the people who work the earth, we see. I think it's become painfully obvious for folks here in the States. We've seen recently with the state of Florida passing the really strict anti-immigration laws that largely drove all of the immigrant labor out of Florida. It left tomatoes rotting on the vine, oranges in the trees, all of this food unharvested, because as American culture, largely we have become removed from that system completely, so completely that we are entirely dependent on indigenous people from the South to make farms function in this country. And I guess I'd like to turn to Casey again to talk about this. Sort of a broader sense of things. You spoke, Casey, earlier about speaking with your elders who did the migration into Oklahoma. I know that I had a woman who I dated early in life, and her family was Choctaw, and they were given a farm in Oklahoma, and then they moved out to the Bay Area. But this I mean, it must be something that you've seen as well with your own eyes. This removal of our own sense of who we are as farmers, as this farmer yeoman nation, the United States, as that now we largely turn to immigrant labor to produce the food that we eat. And I'm sure that's something that was that you've seen happen, living in Oklahoma.
Thank you, Hartman. And you just spoke of so many layers that it's really hard to even find the different things. First of all, not given in a farm in Oklahoma. Those Choctaw people paid with the entire southeast part of what is now called the United States of America, and were forcibly put here, where then the Allotment Act created a situation. And then the second forced removal came through that time in the 1950s and into the 60s, when we were given, which is hilarious to say given, $500 for entire families to move off of the reservations and relocate into cities. And that's how a lot of people got there. People like my family. And we ended up being farm laborers, living in labor camps in the San Joaquin Valley, and becoming part of the machinery of the mega farmers. Those that would spray their poison from the plains as we pick the peaches and then the grapes and all of that, all of us brown people. So I've lived that life. I understand what it is. And I think what keeps coming to me over these last maybe half an hour or more is to commend these organic farmers. I want to say that again. I want to commend you. I've been thinking about the distribution of what the colonial people call wealth, which is generally a piece of plastic, which is a whole nother subject, come to think of it. And it's in a bank, so it's all theoretical. But what you do is so valuable. and enriches our lives so that we have life. That I feel like you guys are the rock stars of the world right now. And instead of those mega people who are making money by killing the earth, that ought to be funneled to you so you can sustain life in the manner in which you're doing, in the manner in which my people did, Hartman's people, Talia's people, Nanari's people, and your original teachings that go as far back as your ancestors doing this before you. Those of you who are using original seeds from this portion of Mother Earth, say thank you to the ancestors that kept them alive and the generations to come. But the distribution of wealth in the society that we live in puts you in a position where you're struggling. And so the fundamental change has to come as a systematic change in our approach to what is valuable. The value of life itself depends on what you are doing and what we are sharing in these words called rights of nature. If those very plants that you're growing don't have a right to live, we all die. If that very water of life that you're using to sustain the plant life is killed, that aquacide that has been perpetrated by this society in the form of extraction, you know, the 50 million gallons that it takes to do the fracking in a 10-mile square area is not usable again for you and for your way of being able to sustain life. You should be the ones that are paid this mega living so you and your families can feed the world right now. We need you. It's valuable for us all to get on the same page with this rights of nature movement, because by educating others that those very plants that you're growing and sharing with all of us have a right to life so that humans and all other things can also live, then we're going to continue this nonsense right now where the manatee are in 95-degree temperatures, where the coral reefs are dying, where the plankton don't have a way for the great mother ocean to live, where the hurricanes continue to get bigger and the tornadoes are stronger and the floods are crazier and the droughts and the fires are crazier, because Earth will purify. What you're doing is making a difference. And I really, more than anything else, want to emphasize that we're on the same page. It's important that we link arms, that we educate others, that we begin to say out loud who we want to have in those so-called leadership positions, that understand that there is a way that we can all go forward together. We can transition into clean energies. The farmers can. And the very things that are growing from the earth can sustain it. Solar energy, the Father, Son. You know, I heard my little friend Nanari talking about a romanticized way of looking at things, and I think that she is spot on in her understanding that the ways that we understand, through understanding that the earth is our mother, she has sustained us for millennia, for all the time that the Creator put things in place. May be in a romanticized way to be able to express it, but it's a fact. She nurtures us no matter what. We continue to have a place to be, water to drink, food to eat. But we can also be those modern people who say, I want solar energy to grow, a sustainable way of looking at where do we get our batteries and how do we make those? There certainly is the intelligence to link us all together into this magical web where we're across time and space. We can do this. We can move into the centuries to come. We can make the generations that we're all hoping to live, just as our ancestors did, putting us into place through prayer, through practice, through practicality. And we can call it rights of nature if we want to. But we all understand it's about a sustainable way of being. We all understand that it's about a culture shift. It's about the way that we interact and the messages that we take out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess we're going to try to get a couple questions in and then look to everybody for some closing statements. Yeah, so I guess maybe 2 or 3 questions. I guess they're going to be posted to the chat board. So I'm looking over to the chat board to see them pop up. Or maybe not. Maybe there aren't questions. I think everybody's just entranced because it looks all what I'm seeing in the chat looks pretty complimentary. Yeah, but I don't see any questions.
Well, if I could, Hartman, I'd like to ask just a general question of helping us to understand what a rights of nature movement looks like, what it could look like in the Northeast, you know, from something that our organic farmers and gardeners could look to plug into, what we could support as NOFAs, as state chapters, as our inter-chapter council. How can we be a part of and support a rights of nature movement in the Northeast?
Yeah, that was gonna be my wrap up question. So I guess, yeah, well, we talked about it some, but yeah, I'm just gonna say that for us as Wampanoag people, we have a language that talks about things and animacy and inanimacy. You can possess things, and I can possess my purse. I can possess my my spoon, and you can possess things linguistically one way just by putting a "na" in front of that. So I'd say "namakusinash," my moccasins. But then when you speak of something like family, you have to possess it different. I put a "na" on the front and an "m" on the back. Nukasin, my mother that can't be separated from me. Natakin, the earth that cannot be separated from the bottom of my feet. That we are inseparable, that we can't be separated. And this concept is something I see again and again in indigenous issues, indigenous languages. And I think it's something that we carry with us, as people that are connected to the land that they come from. And just to sort of put that out there and thinking about that connection with land and connection to place where we are, to then reiterate Dago's question of how do we in the Northeast, with our feet planted where they are, with the roots growing out from underneath our feet into this ground, how do we create a viable rights of nature movement in our part of the world that honors this tradition, that honors this past? And I guess I don't know which of the 3 of you might care to jump in first. If anybody's got a question, the answer ready, or well, Talia, then I'll turn it to you. I haven't heard from you in a while.
Casey, did you want to say something? I don't want to interrupt. No. Okay, well, From our standpoint with the Native Environmental Ambassadors, our first campaign with the rights of herring not only establishes the right, or the herring have rights under our tribal law, but it also establishes the Mashpee Wampanoag Nation to advocate and be bearers of that law. So with us, with talking with the youth and even our Natural Resource Commission, which is made up of, you know, our men and women who are out in the waters and in the field all the time, exercising their Aboriginal rights. I actually just left a meeting before this one with them. And some of the key components that we were talking about within our law is conservation efforts and consultation with the tribe. So kind of mandating or putting it within our law that we recognize ourselves as natural stewards of this land with the traditional ecological knowledge that pertains to really having the resources in an abundance of the way that we need them to sustain. Putting that within our laws, so we're recognizing that we do have a seat at all of the tables that are having this discussion. So whether it be, you know, local farmers or, you know, this town natural resources department or the states or the federal government, that we're recognizing ourselves within this territory of that is, you know, our ancestral homelands, to, you know, really have a voice for those natural beings in those territories. So that's what it looks like for us, not only just having a seat at the table, but gaining the authority back that we need to in order to have a more successful environment for those, you know, natural beings and the natural environment itself. So when you ask our youth that question, a lot of them say, you know, to gain authority of the runs back, because our first campaign it obviously is pertaining around the herring. So within that, it has a lot to do with the runs. So just gaining the respect and acknowledgement is a key part that we see within the Northeast. Because even getting that bit of being able to be at the table all the times and really pushing that, and it coming from our youth who are our future leaders, will show, you know, what needs to keep on continuing to happen. As you know, we say with things that have started here and just keeps on progressing, we're hoping that if we can initiate that here, that it'll only just make sense for everything to follow through as you go west. For, you know, local agencies to just automatically know when they're doing any sort of project that pertains to the environment, to look to the Indigenous people of that land or the water or even the air, you know, to really be a part of the conversation. So we're not only like Miss Casey was saying, like, we're not speaking for nature, we are nature. So to have decisions made about us without us being there is a concept that we need to get past through the non-native communities. And that's a lot where, you know, local farmers and just agencies in general, or even alliances that have been put together to do this, to clean our waters, to save our land, will help. That recognition will help us move forward as an entire community, is the way that we see it within the Northeast.
Thank you, Talia. And, you know, as Native people, the world over, we have less than 5% of the world's territory under our jurisdictional control. And yet within that less than 5% of our jurisdictional control, we have over 80% of the world's biodiversity. And that's a huge telling of how we operate and how we function. Supporting tribal sovereignty is ultimately supporting environmental advocacy, environmental rights. You know, for my grandfather, when he brought the land suit in Mashpee to try to reclaim jurisdictional authority in Mashpee, we constantly had to tell people that we didn't intend to kick anybody out of the town or take their home. We just wanted to function as a jurisdictional authority in the place of the town. Where the town exists, now the tribal government will exist. And I still believe that the tribal government would do a lot better for its citizens than what we've seen the town do. And it's been proven again and again, where you look, the tribes have jurisdiction over territories that the environment is healthier and stronger and better suited to sustain life. Casey, I guess I'd turn into you to speak about some of that, as you mentioned early on, as Ponca is a sovereign tribal nation, to speak to some of that, some of those issues and how that support of tribal sovereignty and tribal jurisdictional authority translates into support for environmental sustainability.
Thank you. One thing I was thinking about, I'm looking at Kim Stoner's talking about a Green Amendment and how maybe the rights of nature could be quantified, so to speak. And I think it was 2006 or 7 when the United Nations passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that's good reading. I'm sure you can find it online. And it tells you a great deal about where the cosmology, as Nanari mentions, or the original instructions, or perhaps our world viewpoint comes from, and how it relates to rights of nature, how it relates to the current political arena, and how it relates to your organization. And I was thinking also in terms of just as an organizer. I remember my brother Carter, who was the leader of the American Indian movement. I remember my mama, who was the drum keeper for the Women's Society. Everything started around the kitchen table, everything. So if you're thinking about organizing there in your territory, wherever that might be, first of all, what these two have mentioned to you about tuning in with whatever Indigenous people's space that you now occupy is a very, very, very vital portion to understand what the earth is teaching you where you are right now. But also for organizing for rights of nature in whatever form you choose to. If you start at your kitchen table with your family and you discuss this and you bring in your extended family, the cousins, the neighbors, and you talk to them about this conversation, and you talk to them about organizing a community meeting, and what does it mean in your portion of Mother Earth where you live right now? What does it look like? For the Ponca, it looks this way. For those that are on this panel, it looks another way, because Mother Earth is speaking to them either from the rivers, the forest, the mountains, the desert, the snow, whatever it is. Then you will begin to understand what does rights of nature look like there. And then you begin to implement those in whatever way that you choose to, whether it is going to town hall meetings and getting the cities to understand what you're talking about. But you organize from a very small point. Even, for us, there's a spirituality, not a religion. A spirituality that has taught us as Ponca people. We're taught that with your morning prayer, when you get up and the sun is beginning to come up and give you a day to be, that you step outside of yourself in the way of the spirit, not in the way of the physical body, but you look at that physical body as you step outside yourself and you walk completely around yourself in your mind and in your spirit. You look and see what it is that you need physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and you ask for that help. That's kind of a microcosm of what has to happen with this rights of nature movement. We look at it. We look at its physical self. What does it need physically to be born into this earth again, where other humans understand what you're talking about? You look at it mentally. How do we write this? into statutes or whatever policy makings you want to enter into? How do we spiritually exude the being of recognizing that we are nature? So even this idea of the rights of human to clean and healthy air, water, and soil, what are those things she's talking about? Those are nature, and they result in a stable climate and healthy ecosystems because we are part of that ecosystem as humans. Everything else has behaved itself. The deer still know how to behave, the fish do, on and on that way. Only humans have broken the natural law. It's us that have to realign. I'm sorry, Hartman, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was hoping that we could, I wish we had more time, I guess. I was hoping we'd be able to get to Nanari as well. But I know that we are supposed to close out at 9, and I think we've hit that mark. So I think with that, I'll turn it back over to the organizers and say to all three of you ladies, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your work, your care, your passion. It's been so important to hear each one of you and the voices that you bring to the table. So, thank you, NOFA, for putting this together. And I don't know, do I turn it over to you, Dago, or?
Sure, I could take it, Hartman. Thank you
All right.
so much. And thank you all. Thank you, Talia. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Ninari, for your generosity, for joining us this evening to share your wisdom and advice. Very much needed, very much appreciated. And I'm really grateful for everyone who showed up. I think we had about 100 at the height, and people will be hearing the recording of this, and hopefully it will continue to reverberate and help set the tone for this conference that we're just starting this evening. And I'm very much looking forward to sharing space with hopefully some of you on Saturday in Worcester. And yeah, thank you again. I do see Ninari just joined us again. I don't know if we have just a minute here. If you have any other final thoughts you'd like to share, Ninari, I'd be happy to have you close this out.
Yes, I think share a little bit about our indigenous way that we have in this capital city. So the way that I feel it for everyone that we hear that we do, that how can we get back to our Mother Earth? So our way to return, it's a very complexity. So we have to be honest. When I say that romanticism is not, I'm not referring to take away that care that we have it to our Mother Earth, to our Father Son. So it's about to understand the reality that it's complex, that is very complex for our youth. It's something impossible. So as adults, right now, if we not assume the return to go back to our Mother Earth, we have to recuperate that knowledge of our ancestor, the wisdom of our ancestor, more there than what I have said that are the good living on the earth. It's more that we can find this repair collectively right here in this church, that if we do really understand this complex, it is our object. How can return to our Mother Earth? We do work with Wawas, means all youth. So to exist, we feel it, to exist. We demand, we recognize the restoration, that conception of the Mother Earth's right. It's first to understand all the system, the oppression system that go through our youth, our young people, through us as adults, like in a global way. What's that impede us? What it does stops us to go. from our feelings that we do feel it, that is the difficult. I understand that we have to take care of our environment, we have to take care of water, but there is more than that. It is our job. It's very important to create a space how to recover that respect. We have to recover the creation of awareness. How can we create again the respect with the youth, the Wawas, for many conditions, for indigenous context, not indigenous, it has been that relationship has been breaking. I want to say like the school, if I don't say it radically, like those space and the Bible space that has been separated us from our Mother Earth. We have to understand that, create those spaces. At different schooling, we have to prioritize that respect. We have to understand that. When we do need to talk about the Mother Earth right, people need to talk about that we do have rights, but we now respect that our mother. So right here with the Wawas, the girls, there is a conception, the practice of conception for the future. Hopefully it will be like this when they're gonna be adults. So we have to understand the education and the growth. It has to be just social justice. The patriarchal, it's vinculated with the Wawas, the girls. Even if they say that the more earth is good and nurture us, not gonna be that a deeply relationship with it. We're not gonna have that spiritual relationship with her. Because this is gonna that relationship into our family and with the women, with all the feminists, could be human or not human, so with the social justice has to be present. And it has been the obstacle, the biggest problem, to recognize that crisis, environment crisis. It is on our shoulder. Like in Ecuador, there is a spell of petroleum, and with the Amazon and with the indigenous. So it's being seen then. So we can see that the racial is present. If we don't start to name them and create those spaces for that education for social justice, there is no way in the future they will recognize our Mother Earth. So that is on one side. Also, we do see that it's very important to create those spaces, school for the language justice, our original language, that language that we do contact with our Mother Earth, the language that understand the chakra, the plants, also the justice, ecology, justice. Also there is understanding of there is a method that they're not doing anything. Also, like let's say this little word with a churro right here in Ecuador, and let us know with the sing, if you're not gonna plant on time, I'm gonna eat everything. So this is part of from our ancestors. On the other side, so we can, before we finish, the education for the justice spiritual. If that doesn't exist, there will be no space to educate, to show out that it has been unjust spiritual. So it's gonna be impossible later to demand for our Mother Earth's right. So this is what is going on. So at least for us is to acknowledge that we have to create a spaces, but for this avenue for our youth, for our kids, hopefully in the future they can do a better job compared to what we're doing right now.
Thank you, Dinari. Gracias, Dinari. Gracias a todos. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Hasta luego.